Did Natalie Harp lie about how Trump saved her life? It seems like the Natalie Harp cancer story was never fully checked out. So Natalie Harp has told the country for the last 7 years now that she would be dead if it weren't for Trump signing the Right to Try Act on May 30th, 2018. The Washington Post found her tweeting about that same treatment she was already taking that March, specifically March 27th, 2018. And that is the tidiest problem in this very deep pile. The rest is so much worse. So her story has appeared in at least 3 incompatible versions, none of them corrected. Nobody ever asked her, hey, Natalie, maybe you should pick one. The hospital error that supposedly started it all left no paperwork, nowhere to be found in 11 years. Nobody thought like, hey, maybe we had this major thing go down. Somebody should consider writing it down. The disease she named doesn't behave the way she says it behaved. And she went from an unread blog post to a presidential stage in 14 days, which is a better turnaround than most people. And since then, she has been promoted twice. So this whole story is the reason we know her name. It's the reason she has a job in the West Wing. So Harp is now the diaper caddy, executive assistant, human printer, depending on who you ask. She works for the president of the United States, and she's in a position with no confirmation hearing and 0 vetting beyond the president's personal preference for childish-looking blondes. And her resume, outside of the Trump administration, amounts to her family company in a year on a no-name cable news station. She has been named in a federal lawsuit as the primary White House staffer helping the president post to an account that his own company sells early access to. So when people ask, what is she doing there? The cancer story is what you usually hear. It's normally the answer you get. And real quick, I'm Lauren Paritra. Most of this work that we're gonna share next, Willa and I, my co-host, my dog, my daughter, comes from Heather Ashley, who published a deep dive on her Substack in an article titled, In Receipts We Trust. This was published on August 21st of this year. She pulled the corporate registries, the archived web posts, the domain records, and the oncology literature, which is more work than we've seen from anyone else out there. And we're gonna ask you to take a moment to subscribe. We're gonna link Ashley's work in the comments. We do this every single day, Willa and I, at a pure principle, independent, network-free, bootstrapped, in order to keep you safe from Stephen Miller, who is very hot and muggy in LA today. Very hot and muggy, feels like Florida. And unfortunately, this is the perfect combination for Stephen Miller weather. So if you might want to check underneath your sinks, underneath your drains, behind a washing machine, dark, damp places is where he dwells, and you might get Stephen Miller eggs. So be safe, subscribe, leave us a comment, 5 words or more, 6 words or more. Hype if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Spotify, please leave us a 5-star rating. The haters do not want us to be great. And stay safe from Stephen Miller. So this is the version everybody heard.
Good evening, I'm Natalie Harp, a formerly forgotten American from California. In the classic Jimmy Stewart film, It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is given a great gift, the chance to see what the world would be like without him. Tonight, Mr. President, we'd like to give you that same gift, because without you, we'd all be living in Pottersville, sold out to a crooked Mr., or I should say, a crooked Mrs. Potter, with no hope of escape except death itself. I should know, because I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you. About 5 years ago, I was the victim of a notoriously deadly medical error. I survived, but only to be diagnosed with a rare and terminal bone cancer. You know, the Democrats love to talk about healthcare being a human right, but a right to what? Well, I'll tell you. To them, it's a right to marijuana, opioids, and the right to die with dignity, a politically correct way of saying assisted suicide. I was told I was a burden to my family.
So we all have probably seen this clip, if not in real time, in recent times. This was at the Republican National Convention and at events hosted by the president. In this version, we see Natalie Harp, who was a young woman from California, dying of bone cancer. Every treatment failed her. Every clinical trial has turned her away. And then Trump signs the Right to Try Act. Conveniently, a door that has been locked swings open, and Natalie survives and goes on to become his diaper caddy. She then owes him her life and her service. And she said this on every single stage that he's given her. She first told it in a LinkedIn op-ed published on June 12th, 2019. She deleted it later, but the archive kept it. And it started off with a nurse's error in November 2015. An IV mixed up with sterile water and a young woman left housebound. It moves through a bone cancer diagnosis, the failure of what she called only 2 chemotherapies available to her, and the rejection from every trial she's tried for. It ends with the heroic Right to Try Act being signed by Donnie Dump, and with an oncologist finally willing to prescribe her an FDA-approved immunotherapy drug for an unapproved use. The last phrase is where the whole thing falls to shit. I'm going to pop up on the screen this FDA for patients documentation for eligible investigational drugs. We also have this available in plainer language that I will put on next as we're talking through this. So the right to try applies to investigational drugs that haven't yet been approved for anything else. That's the FDA's own description of it and the entire premise of the law. It exists for people who need something that isn't on the shelves yet. So prescribing an approved drug for a purpose it wasn't approved for is called off-label prescribing. Doctors have done it legally for decades. It needs no new statute and no new signing ceremony. So if Harp described her own treatment accurately, the treatment was already available to her. The law she credits with saving her life has nothing to do with what she says she received. So nobody has called her out on this either. She wrote the sentence herself, and then she repeated the story for 7 years. Natalie Harp said here, Trump saved her life, and experts doubt that's true. And somehow that's not even the weirdest part yet, because then we have this tweet. On March 27th, 2018, Hart praised Trump for speeding up drug approvals and mentioned that the chemo she was on at the time hadn't been approved 5 years earlier. Right to Try was signed that May. So whatever she was taking in March, she was taking it while the bill sat in the House. And either that chemo was something separate from the drug in her op-ed, or it was the same thing described loosely. Neither of these explanations or this reading helps her out. And if it was something separate, then a new bone cancer drug came through the FDA during her window, and nobody in the field wrote it up. I'll pop up another source on the screen here. The research says development stalled after MAP chemotherapy came in during the 1970s and 80s, and outcomes have sat at a plateau ever since. Those cancers account for most bone cancers in people her age. If it was the same drug, the timeline works fine. She was already taking it. An off-label prescription, perfectly legal, 2 months before the law she credits with saving her life, with making it all possible, was even signed into effect. Well, she was on the drug before the miracle of Trump. And then she spent 7 years peddling this narrative, telling people it was the other way around. And the dates, her account doesn't hold up to these either. So the op-ed puts the start date at November 9th, 2015. A date she points out is exactly 1 year before Trump won. Fox News introduced her 2 days after the op-ed and said she'd fought stage 2 bone cancer for most of her life. A July 2019 write-up, working from that same Fox segment, describes 4 years of denied treatment before a 2018 law, which would put us at the start of 2014. Most of her life, 2014, she's a few years younger than me. The math doesn't really make sense. So those versions were live at the very same time on platforms she was actively posting on. And as far as anyone can tell, she never corrected any of them. No issued correctment statement. Then in a July 2019 interview, she also credited the right to try with getting people organs. The statute covers investigational drugs. There's nothing on it about organs because that would be fucking weird. What are you giving out kidneys for people to try? What are you talking about, Natalie? That is nuts. And real quick, today's episode is brought to you by Laundry Sauce. As y'all know, Willa has been sick all summer long. And what that's meant for me is so much laundry. So I needed to make it a little bit more fun. So I started using Laundry Sauce. And honestly, I'm obsessed. The scent is incredible. Italian bergamot is my favorite, naturally. It's so fresh and so clean. I actually look forward to doing all the laundry now. And I've even got my neighbors asking, what is that? Here's the thing. Laundry Sauce is not your basic drugstore detergent. These are premium scented pods made by actual perfumers. The pods are super concentrated with enzymes that actually tackle everything. Mud, stains, coffee spills, all of it. And get this, Target just started carrying them. And for a limited time, you get 20% off your entire order when you use code Lauren at laundrysauce.com. That's 20% off your order at laundrysauce.com with promo code Lauren, Loren. And they've got a full money back guarantee. So if you don't get better smelling, cleaner laundry, you get a full refund. No questions asked. So head over to laundrysauce.com and use code Lauren, that's Loren, for 20% off. After your purchase, they'll ask about where you heard about Laundry Sauce too. Please support our show and tell them we sent you here. It's time to make laundry day the best day of the week. And then the paperwork. A hospital error bad enough to nearly kill somebody leaves a trail. Someone would presumably file a complaint. I think Trump people are pretty litigious, or a lawyer would get involved, or the hospital logs it as a safety incident. So let's make sure that doesn't happen to people again. In almost 11 years, nobody can find any of that. There's no record of any illegal action, no mention of the incident anywhere before it appeared as a political origin story back in June 2019. There's no fundraiser either, which is a neat trick for an American cancer patient, and a neater one for a woman whose public identity had a lot to do with posting about her own life. In 7 years of telling this story, she has never named the hospital where it happened. She has never once named the oncologist who eventually treated her and helped save her life. It wasn't fucking Trump. The drug has no name either, and neither does a single one of the trials that turned her down. So Natalie Harp's cancer survival story, and what we know now, is that Snopes tried to fact check this in August this year and had to give up. Again, not because there's no true or false. It was unrateable because there's nothing to rate against it. Her mother was there through all of this, and hang on to that because we're going to get into her family next. Her mother hasn't said a word. Nothing about it on the record at all. And before I get into the medicine, here's the part that matters more than anything I'm about to say next. Nothing in this story can be checked against anything. Nothing in Natalie's story. There's no name to call. There's no document to pull. So the only evidence that any of it even happened is her saying it did. Next to Donald Trump, the hero. The guy like taking the food away and being like, here, I brought the food back. So what comes next is what happens when you take her at her word and hold it up against the disease she named. So Harp has always said stage 2. Per these bodies of research, stage 2 bone cancer is early stage. It's still confined to the bone. That's the medical literature. It's described as treated with the goal of curing you. She is also described being counseled towards do not resuscitate orders and towards the voluntary decision to stop eating and drinking. So take a look at this Liberty University, this write-up.
And about 3 years ago, I was a victim of a medical error, which no one has survived of. I was infused with sterile water, but I survived thanks to a rare blood condition, but it took over 2 years to figure out what was wrong with me because I live in California, unfortunately, and all that we have here are a lot of rights. The Democrats love to talk about rights, but they weren't really rights that I wanted. It was right to die. I was even coached in the voluntary stopping of eating and drinking, pretty much starving yourself to death. I was offered medical marijuana, opioids, and I'm like, no, I just want to get better. And so I started tuning in for the first time into politics because I had never had a representative before. All my representatives were Democrats. And so I thought, why should I care about politics? And so when I was housebound by the medical error, trying to find care, I tuned into the 2016 election and heard President Trump talking about every person has a right to fight for their life. And what he was going to do with the VA and trying to reform that is exactly what needs to happen in the healthcare system because Obamacare made healthcare about a president rather than a patient.
Someone who works in palliative care was asked about that combination, gave a blunt answer, which is that for stage 2 cancer, it gets treated every single time. Her op-ed says only 2 chemotherapies existed for her cancer and that both of them failed. Bone cancers aren't treated that way. Standard regimens combine these types of medications, and they're treated with these combo regimens that run several drugs at once under names like MAP and MAPIE. Apologies if I'm pronouncing these wrong. Shout out to the cancer community. I have a lot of friends who are experts here. So she says every clinical trial rejected her. And at the convention, she explained that they turned her down because she'd make them look bad. The American Cancer Society tells her bone cancer patients, go find a trial. Rare diseases are the hardest ones to recruit for, which means trials want exactly the patient she says she was. Liberty University's alumni magazine, Liberty University, home of the Griff, gave us byproducts like Erica Kirk. Liberty University's alumni magazine went further and wrote that she was rejected for being one of the youngest patients with her rare cancer. The average osteosarcoma patient is diagnosed at 15 years old. Natalie was not 15 years old. She was 24. None of that proves she was never sick. What it proves is narrower. The story she told doesn't match the law she credited or the disease she named. And sure, diseases we know can act abnormally. There's always outliers. But the stranger part is the story also only worked if she came from nowhere. As a Californian who never cared about politics and didn't bother to register voting at 18, she joined Twitter in September 2016, a few weeks before that election. And through her 20s, she worked for her family's hospitality company. Hold on to this. And California corporate records list her as its corporate secretary, while her LinkedIn describes her as a self-employed entrepreneur. Her grandfather founded the firm after a run as a Sheraton executive vice president. And he was well off enough and well known enough in the industry that John Maxwell opened a leadership book with him. Even the domain natalieharp.com was registered to the family company under her father's corporate email address. So those are the same years she describes as a housebound, wheelchair-bound woman, which is a demanding schedule for a woman serving as an officer of a corporation and finishing her MBA at Liberty at the same time. And we know people are resilient. They can do these things. But these things don't seem to intersect with any sort of public record or corroborating story. The company also had a board of directors. The Wayback Machine saved that page from October 20th, 2016. 3 weeks before the election, sitting between the CEOs of Omni and the Shangri-La is Eric Dazinger, CEO of Trump Hotel Collection. He's still there. In the July 31st, 2018 capture, 9 weeks after Trump signed the law her story would be built on. The page stopped archiving after that, so there's no telling how long he stayed. That proves nothing about how she came into Trump's attention. What it does is take away the frame. Her family's company had Trump's hotel CEO on its board for at least 2 years before she went on TV as a stranger whose life was saved by Trump and a Trump-signed law. 14 days after that, 14 days, whatever else is true, the story worked, and it worked fast. She published this op-ed on June 12th, 2019. 2 days later, she was telling it on Fox and Friends, and Trump called into the segment on his birthday. 14 days from a post that nobody read to a stage beside the president. 14 days, that's how long it took. Trump kept using it too. At a Louisiana rally in October 2019, he called the right to try a miracle and said so many people had been saved. According to an ethicist tracking it for the Washington Post, fewer than 10 people had used the law by 2020. Harp described her own condition in August 2020 at the convention, where she told him she would have died waiting. 6 years later, she has worked most of the presidential campaign in a full White House schedule. And neither she nor the press office has said another word, not one peep about the illness. The story got her through the door, and then we haven't heard the story since. She is now, according to this federal complaint, the person typing the president's post, printing the post. Nobody ever checked the thing that she was hired on? Pretty interesting, isn't it? And that's not the only strange thing about Natalie. Once you start digging into her family and more about her family history and their ties, starts to look a whole lot more sideways. So we're going to keep digging in here. Make sure you're hitting follow. Make sure you're subscribing. Leave us a comment, 6 words or more. Hype if you're watching on YouTube. 5-star rating, please, if you're listening on Spotify. The haters really keeping our rating down, but the numbers, the views are up thanks to you. or plays, I should say. So show us some support in the comments. Let us know what else you want to think. This story was inspired by your feedback. We are going to keep digging in. Her family's up next. Make sure you turn your notifications on. You do not want to miss this. TTT.